Eyes were prominent in ancient Egypt. They even survive today in superstition surrounding the evil eye. Eyes in ancient Egypt could symbolize protection, destruction, offerings, and sometimes allowed the dead to see the living world. However, this all makes for some very complex mythology. From very early times in ancient Egypt, the sun and the moon were regarded as the eyes of the great falcon god Horus. The original form of Horus was that of a sky god, known as Lord of the Sky. Though the two eyes eventually became different, with the left eye, the Eye of Horus, often being regarded as the symbol of the moon, and the right eye, the Eye of Ra, being that of the sun. Horus usually wore the red and white crown as a symbol of kingship over the entire kingdom of Egypt. The eye is personified in the goddess Wadjet. Wadjet was one of the earliest Egyptian goddesses. The Wadjet was intended to protect the pharaoh in the afterlife, and she was the protector of Lower Egypt and the native Delta shrine. Its use in Egyptian iconography is widespread and relatively clear. Above all, the eye was a protective device, and this is seen in the countless representations of the Wadjet, which are found in amulets and jewelry, and on the protective flags which were placed over the embalming incision of mummies.
Throughout history, it has happened over and over again. People turn their intellect over to cult of personality mass movements, and it's happening again.
A lot of people think that the Federal Reserve is already part of the government. They're not. It's controlled by cliques of unelected, unaccountable bankers meeting in secret.
The Federal Reserve is totally private.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. So long as that is in place and there is no evidence that the administration or the Congress or anybody else is requesting that we do things other than what we think is the appropriate thing, then what the relationships are don't frankly matter.
1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Floor of the House, where 3 members of Congress were on the floor. At that time, they only needed a majority of votes to pass it. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. 20 years later, 1933, under Roosevelt, the United States was declared bankrupt. And in 1933, the Federal Reserve Private Bank says, okay, USA, what are you going to pledge as collateral on the debt you owe me? What happened by 1936? Does anybody know? We instituted Social Security system, and you and I and our children and our children's children were pledged as collateral on the debt of our government to the Federal Reserve.
To alter our course from tyranny to liberty, to defeat the corrupt elite, we must get past the puppets and confront the real power structure of the planet. Presidents are now little more than corporate pitchmen who take all the political heat, while the controllers remain in the shadows, safe from public scrutiny. In the real executive power structure, the president serves the military-industrial complex, itself owned by the international bankers. If there's a revolution, the population just throws out the prime minister or president. The elite stays in power because the public is never aware of who the real enemy is. George W. Bush, who had claimed to be a conservative, had tripled the size of the federal government. And more than 5,000 dead U.S. troops. The Patriot Act.
Obama is a cool hoax. He works for Wall Street. He's an agent of finance capital.
It happened after 9/11. The American people en masse were swept into a mob psychology, irrationally throwing their common sense to the wind and doing whatever the administration told them to. That George W. Bush was a deceitful thug and that the economy was in free fall. Obama pledged in hundreds of speeches and interviews that within 6 months of being elected, he was going to bring our troops home from Iraq. But after he was inaugurated, the story changed. Now he said that they would look at bringing some of the troops home in 16 months. 2 weeks later, his story had changed again. Barack Obama swore that he would vote to repeal the Patriot Act, but then he voted for its reauthorization. Obama decried the Bush administration's illegal warrantless wiretapping of the American people. Then he voted to legalize it. Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma and Congressman Brad Sherman of California, amongst others, told the world that the entire Congress had been threatened with martial law by the White House and the Treasury Department if they didn't pass the so-called banker bailout bill.
The only way they can pass this bill is by creating and sustaining a panic atmosphere. That atmosphere is not justified. Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill on Monday, that the sky would fall, the market would drop 2,000 or 3,000 points the first day, another couple thousand the second day, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no. That's what I call fear-mongering. Unjustified.
The final version of the bill was kept secret from the Congress until minutes before the vote on October 3rd, 2008. The Federal Reserve had promised total transparency, that every dime would be accounted for.
I don't think anyone questions, Mr. Kashkari, that you're working hard. Our question is who you're working for.
Next, the central bankers loaned the federal government back $787 billion of our own money at interest for President Obama's so-called stimulus package. The spending bill was really a takeover bill designed to further federalize the states and to pay off rich donors that had donated to both parties. For over a century, the Anglo-American establishment had worked to bring the world system to this point. Artificially engineered global bankruptcy. Now that the bankers were holding the world hostage, they issued their ultimatum. The only solution to restart the global economy would be to set up a planetary government ruled by a new Bank of the World. A Bank of the World owned and controlled by them. And it's Obama's job to sucker the public into standing down so the bankers' agenda can move forward unhindered.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Number one, bring the United States under the complete regulatory control of a private offshore superbank known as the Bank of the World. More than 100 new taxes are now being developed under the umbrella of curbing greenhouse gases. The new taxes will be paid directly to the private bank consortium. Under the cap-and-trade system, citizens will be forced to pay taxes on thousands of products to private cap-and-trade services owned by Al Gore and other elitists. There will be taxes on light bulbs, water, trash pickup, air travel, train travel, bus, ship, medicine, steel production, mining, clothing, laundry, asphalt are just a few of the new taxes to be levied.
But to truly transform our economy, to protect our security and save our planet from the ravages of climate change, we need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. So I ask this Congress to send me legislation that places a market-based cap on carbon pollution and drives the production of more renewable energy in America.
The notion of anthropogenic global warming is a fraud. In other words, the idea that the planet is getting warmer and that human activity is somehow responsible is a pseudo-scientific fraud. It's a big lie. It's a monstrosity. Remember the Nazis, they had race science, race hygiene. They said Aryan blood is different from any other kind of blood. This was, of course, idiocy, a fantastic piece of nonsense. Today, we've got something similar. Global warming caused by human activity, and the answer to that is carbon tax plus cap and trade, according to the wishes of Al Gore, Prince Charles, and basically the entire world banking community, the world oligarchy.
FEMA is now building giant camps in every region of the country, and the Congress has introduced bills like the National Emergency Centers Act, H.R. 645, which merges local governments and the police under federal control.
And as we all know that have watched these things, they're ready for the riots. With these detention centers that are being opened up around the country, with state police training for riot control in the event of economic calamity and food riots, they know what's going on and they're prepared for it.
Next, Obama ordered the Defense Department to issue DoD Directive 1404.10, establishing a 1 million person civilian army under his control. Barack Obama has refused to rescind Presidential Decision Directive 51, signed by George W. Bush. The directive plainly states the president is a dictator and that Congress is ceremonial. Disarming the American people, Obama operatives in the Congress have introduced more than 10 bills that would end the Second Amendment as we know it. Massive restrictions on the First Amendment guarantee of free speech. The President, Congress, and the FCC have announced plans to not only curtail speech on talk radio and newspapers, but to also regulate speech on the internet through the Orwellian-named Fairness Doctrine. Obama is already pushing to expand the Department of Defense budget and to station more U.S. troops overseas to encircle Russia, China, Iran.
Obama basically does a couple of things. One is, again, this idea, kick the Chinese out of Africa, kick them out of Sudan where they get oil, kick them out of Zimbabwe where they get raw materials, start a civil war in Congo, another big source of raw materials. Al-Qaeda, an arm of the U.S. intelligence community, is now active in Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. You've got a destabilization going on in Kenya around Odinga. That's Obama's cousin.
Obama must convincingly play the part of the president and convince the people of the United States that the buck actually stops with him. For their program to work, it is essential that the people not learn that the presidency is now nothing more than theater, because if they did, the people would stop looking at the pawns and start looking for the king. It's Obama's job to sell the public on globalist policies that aren't in the people's best interest. In summation, Barack Obama is a Madison Avenue created fad. All of the crazed Obama worship, being pushed by the corporate media, is scientifically designed to capture the public in a net of peer pressure mass euphoria. Next, realize that we are all being propagandized 24/7. Investigate all information for yourself, be it political parties, the media, or this film. Be aware of the tricks that the elite use, like the staging of false flag terror attacks and other crises.
This is the center of endurance, and endurance is what wins wars. Not how many people you kill, but how long can you endure.